Well, thank you everybody for coming, and especially on this very blustery, wintry day we have today. Hope nobody got hit by a tree branch on the way in. We had a couple fall in our parking lot this morning and endangering our vehicles and our people. So anyway, quite the day to have an event. We're doing something a little different today. It's kind of a pioneering event for us at DOGGR. We're actually streaming live via Skype. So I want to say welcome to all of our guests who are around the country on the Skype connection. So welcome to our DOGGR event. I'm Bill Bartling. I'm the district deputy here in Bakersfield, Inland District. And I want to thank you for coming to our session on What's About DOGGR. There's a bunch of other people here in the room I'd like to recognize, and starting with Pat Abel, standing in the back over there, district deputy for Orcutt and Ventura. So Pat will be talking a lot about her district. We have a representative from the Northern District as well, DK over in the corner, and where's John Iverson? There's John. So John's here from the coast as well, and there's a whole bunch of people from right here in Bakersfield. Maybe you guys could all stand up. So there's Dustin, there's Jean, there's Vernon, there's Janelle. So we got people all over the room here. So what we want to be able to do is first and foremost provide information about who we are, what we're doing, why it's really cool to work for DOGGR, why a lot of us joined, and why a lot of us are really energized by it. But we wanted to have also the opportunity to meet you all one-on-one as much as possible to be able to find out, what's your interest, what do you want to do, why you have interest in DOGGR, what are your skills, your backgrounds, and see if there's a match in there somehow. Because it turns out we're in the mode of trying to add a bunch of people to our organization, and that's why we're here today. So we're going to do a few things. We can advance the slides. No? There it goes. So we're going to talk a bit about DOGGR. Just an overview of who we are, where we've been going. There's been a lot of changes in the organization over the last, well, I've been with DOGGR for about 16 months. Certainly over the last 16 months, a lot of changes. And a lot more yet to come, and I'll talk about those. We're going to have representation from 3 districts here, and Pat will cover the 4th district and the headquarters organization as well. There's going to be a conversation about how do you get a job with DOGGR. So there's 2 couple pieces here, how to apply, how to get in, and then of course it's all about talking with you and finding out your questions, your interest, and how can we help you understand how to navigate the state system to get into the organization. And again, at the end, we're just hoping to have a chance just to meet you a little bit more informally. So let me just start out with things that probably a lot of you already know. Oil in California. So about 550,000 barrels a day produced, and which is about a third, right, of what we consume every day. So we continue to import 2/3 of the hydrocarbons that we consume every day into California. So here we are, one of the largest producing states in the nation, but our appetite for oil exceeds our ability to produce. So these resources are owned, it's about 80,000 active oil and gas wells and about 450 operators and service companies in the state. So our role in all of this is managing all of these wells, all of this production, all of these operators, all the infrastructure. Well, and we'll talk about some of the things that we do more specifically as part of the DOGGR operation. Kind of getting a little more specific in oil. So here we are in Bakersfield. You can see that in terms of production or reserves, it's the largest reserve basin in California, 20 billion barrels. So Ventura and Orcutt and Santa Maria are over here, a few billion barrels. Los Angeles, 10, and Sacramento. This is not my slide. I would have spelled it right. About 2 billion barrels. But you can see that we have an awful lot of oil here, and those of you who live in the valley understand. So much of it sits out here on the west side, but we also have some issues on the east side that we worry about an awful lot. We'll also talk about what we do about that as well. So California is the 4th largest producing state in the nation, which makes us pretty important behind Texas. Hard to keep up with those guys, especially when they make giant new discoveries in the Permian Basin. Who knew the Permian Basin would be so exciting? When I was working at Chevron and Oxy back in the day, we were trying to divest the Permian Basin because it was gone, it was dead. Okay, but what a testimony to what happens when you apply modern technologies, new advancements, drilling technologies, recovery technologies. You turn old fields into remarkable new assets. So there's Texas, especially with the Permian. So this isn't really a state, right? It's offshore, North Dakota, and then California. So we take out the offshore, which is really isn't a state, that's federal. We're actually third. When you take a look at what we do with hydrocarbons in the state, so this is this is a chart about this California energy consumption estimates 2014. So this is the energy that we consume every day, right? And so you can see overwhelmingly, hydrocarbons are the main source of energy in the state. Well, one of the things, and I already talked about, this is just a third, right, of the hydrocarbons we consume, but still it's dominant in the energy mix that we have. One of the things I thought was really interesting also was this bottom graph here, which is the imported electrons. So not only are we importing 2/3 of our hydrocarbons, but we're importing 1/3 of our electrons. And actually this is an increase in import from 2010, where it was just 25%. So here we are as a state in an aggressive electrification and everything we do, cars, everything else. And here we are, we're actually importing a lot of electricity, and that import rate is getting bigger. So this really kind of all underscores the importance of the production of energy in the state, according to our rules, the way that we like to do it, and it's the most environmentally compliant method in the nation. And here we have quite a need that we can see expressed in these charts. And then the commerce part of this, what do you get out of a barrel of oil? Well, it's not just oil, right? You get gasoline, there's a whole bunch of other things. When you think about what's the total value in dollars that come out of a barrel of oil, it's big numbers, right? So you're talking about a lot of jobs, you're talking about a lot of labor income, a lot of value added to the GDP, a lot of money in the output, and fiscal contributions and taxes, $21 billion in state and federal taxes. So there's a lot of cash that comes out of the ground and goes into the economy, which makes jobs, turns the lights on. Starbucks is successful, and it's all has a lot to do with these barrels coming out of the ground. But it's not just the gasoline. So when you think about a barrel of oil at $50 a barrel now, it's actually worth a lot more than $50 when you look at all the rest of the products that come out of this refined products. So DOGGR, the marketplace. We're about 100 years old, 102 years old now. So we started in 1915. So you can kind of see how the world's changed from when DOGGR started, which was actually not a number of years after the start of the oil discovery and production in California, which dates back, of course, before 1900, to today. And you can see that here's a kind of a modern picture. I'm sure a lot of you have seen this. This is probably Kern River or something like that. Very dense industrial setting, but yet very clean, right? So you're not seeing a lot of oil spilled around. You're seeing nice clean pipelines, well-kept pump jacks. So it's a change in the kind of the culture of how these high-density industrial facilities are running, and a lot of this has to do with the regulations, and a lot of it has to do with DOGGR's role in managing those Department of Conservation is where we live, and here's our mission and vision statement. So a safe, sustainable environment for all Californians. So pretty simple statement, but that's really what conservation is all about. And the mission is really to balance today's needs with tomorrow's challenges and fosters intelligent, sustainable, and efficient use of California's energy, land, and mineral resources. In a prior forum, you talked about a couple of main objectives, and one is to maximize the value of the resource to the state of California. And the second one is to do it without hurting anything or anybody. So we have a charter as stewards both of the resource and of the environment, which puts us in kind of an interesting balancing game, right? So where is the sweet spot to go through all these things so we can maximize the value and still maintain the value, the protection of the environment, health, and people. So what do we do? A few things, right? So we protect life, health, property, natural resources. We prevent damage to underground and surface water. So most of what we do is water these days. So it was the last time we had a conversation about oil. It's been a while. It's mostly about water, and I'll talk about some of the things we're doing with water. And then oil, gas, and geothermal resources. Again, prevent damage to these things, maximizing the value. So when we talk about water, especially, and I'll talk about the Aquifer exemption and underground injection control processes that we're going through, there's an emphasis on beneficial uses, and those beneficial uses that we protect are public drinking water, of course, water in a corner. We don't want oil in it or toxins. Residential use for what are various purposes, ag and livestock, industrial, and enhanced oil recovery are all beneficial uses of the water resources in the state. And just kind of, I guess we could probably say we're maybe exiting the drought. If you've driven up to Sacramento recently, you've seen places flooded, right? I mean, Tule Lake even has water in it again, of all places. But nevertheless, water is a very precious resource in the state. In fact, in a lot of ways, more valuable than water. And so our job is to make sure that all the operations that we're involved with don't have the capacity to threaten the water. Organizationally, so here's our boss, Governor Brown, and underneath Governor Brown is Natural Resources Agency Secretary Laird, Conservation Department Director Bunn. So I would say realistically, maybe Pat's more connected than I am, so she probably gets to go see the governor and the secretary. But I only get to see Director Bunn, and certainly our management in Sacramento, Supervisor Harris and Chief Deputy Garoche. So in Sacramento, there's a couple of places. There's HQ headquarters programs. There's the Northern District that DK is going to talk about. And then we have 3 other districts: Coastal, Inland, and Southern, which we'll talk more about in detail. When we get down into DOGGR, so again, these are the districts and the programs. But I want to just illustrate here some of the things that the jobs really, that this is a job seminar, some of the jobs that are in here. So there's a level here below the district deputy, which is a supervising oil and gas engineer, and there's several of those positions open in the state today. Senior oil and gas engineers, there's a bunch of them around the room. Raise your hands. Yes. So this is actually the front line for our regulatory efforts and do all the permitting, all the underground injection controls, the Aquifer exemptions. This is really the main interface into everything we do regulatory-wise. And each of these seniors manages an area and a number of people, including associate oil and gas engineers and engineering geologists. We're certainly interviewing for all the positions in supervising oil and gas engineers, seniors, associates, and engineering geologists across all of the offices in the state, which is Bakersfield, Orcutt, Ventura, Los Angeles, and Sacramento. So here's the district. So we divvy it about this way. This is really great the way we drew this line here. This little intersection of lines right here, there was a lot of the conversation and negotiation around that, and the main reason is that there's a spot, I think it's right about there, Pat, which is Aliso Canyon. So how did that happen and not land in my district? I was a better arm wrestler, I think. And there's another gas storage facility up here to the north, which we put on the north side of that line. So so we ended up with no gas storage facilities, and as it turned out, Aliso Canyon, I don't have to tell you what happened to Aliso Canyon. It's become, and Pat will talk about it because it's in her district, and it's become quite the episode for DOGGR and for Pat as well. But you can see this is the boundaries of Southern District down here at Cypress. They have ambitions of moving, I think, out to the beach. Pat has a couple of offices that she'll talk about. We're here in Bakersfield. As you probably all know, we had an office in Coalinga, which we merged into the Bakersfield office, and then Sacramento is the headquarters in the Northern District. So probably said this already, but it's up here again. So these are the positions that we are looking to fill over the next little while. Pretty much across the spectrum, including I didn't talk about, which is technical support, and why that's important. We'll get into when I talked about Renewal Plan and the new technologies, and the new work processes that we're going through, and how we're revolutionizing how we work, think, and communicate. So responsibilities and oversights, again, permitting, aquifer exemptions, underground injection control. We spend a lot of time in the field witnessing and improving operations. We interact with the public all the time, especially through talks, through meetings, through public records requests, tracking well histories, analyzing new technologies, writing and enforcing regulations, environmental reviews, idle and orphan well management. There's new legislation around that coming up, and dealing with wells that have been abandoned or deserted by operators which impose some sort of a threat to the environment. Things that we really have to have an oversight about, we worry about a lot, is water quality. And as I mentioned, we talk a lot about water these days and less about oil, but it's really about protecting drinking water. Hydraulic fracturing was a new legislation called SB4 that went into effect a year and a half ago now. And it has changed how we look at hydraulic stimulation. Earthquakes. There's lots of earthquakes in California. and there's a lot of questions about the capacity for oil and gas operations or any other operation that's caused by humans to impact earthquakes. So while we feel that the geology of California really isn't conducive to such things, there's certainly a possibility, so we have our eyes open and we're making sure that we understand it all. And then fugitive emissions. So Aliso Canyon really shone a bright light on methane releases, and so now the conversation is more about what is the capacity for fugitive methane release out of pipelines and valves and other such things. So we continue to talk about those topics going forward with our regulatory writing new regulations and working with operators. So we had this thing called the Renewal Planner. It was authored in about a little over a year ago now. And it was written by a couple of guys, David Bunn, who was the director of conservation, and the guy who was the previous supervisor of oil and gas, Steve Bolin. And there was 4 things that they really wanted to address in this. And one was kind of regulatory overhaul, which ended up with some new regulations. So there was a recognition that the DOGGR really needed to get in the game with taking a hard look at how a lot of things are being done. So a lot of new regs have come out, especially around injection projects and aquifer exemptions. 2 other things that they wrote in the plan, though, was really about how we change the way DOGGR works, right? How do we think? How do we communicate? How do we work? It's about modernizing data management and ensuring a high-quality workforce. And so a big part of why we're here today is both of these things, because we're running down the road now toward modernizing the data management systems and some of our technologies, and we're also trying to take big steps forward in high-quality workforce. Now, we're doing this in a number of ways, which I'll talk about in a little more detail later, but this is really part of a big part of the plan is how do we up our game in how we work and how we communicate and how we think. So one of these is a dedication to technical excellence. So we're moving into an era of a lot of new modern tools, a lot of new modern technologies, really getting to a science and data-driven decision process. This was one of the biggest goals for Dr. Bolin was we need to make decisions that are defensible, and they're defensible if we have information, data, and analysis that supports it. So we would like to be in a position where we say, here's our decision, and here's why, and here's the information, here's the data, here's the analysis that we did. It's not arbitrary, it's not random, it's based on science and engineering and good data. So this is a very important part of the renewal plan, is science and data-driven decision processes. This comes with training the staff and hiring new staff with advanced skills, and then really the whole infrastructure of the technology of the division as well. So aquifer exemptions, I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this because you've probably all read about it in the papers, and if any of you are with an oil company or were with an oil company, I'm sure that's all you thought, slept, and ate for last year, as we did. So it's a pretty simple process, really. What we do is just figure out, this is not a great picture. That's actually not a dry hole, is it? Because all you do is perf there. But you have an anticline here, and you've got a cap rock, and you've got oil, you've got gas, you've got water down here. And if you're going to produce oil and water, the idea is how do you put it back here where it doesn't get out, right? So you don't get it into these shallower areas which have waters of beneficial use. So our process in all of this has been to be able to document with great certainty a number of things. One is about the quality of water that we're talking about, and secondly, what is the sealing capacity, the containment capacity of the geology and the engineering practices to make sure that any injected water stays where it needs to stay. So it's all, again, about making sure that we don't put produced water back into the ground that has potential to contaminate drinking water. So our process around this looks like this. We work with the operators to construct a technical application, and after quite a bit of iteration, we go through an internal peer review process to do this. We decide, hey, we think it's pretty solid. And if it's not solid, we tell the operators, we need more data, or it's not going to go. So once we've decided that it's past technical merit in the district, then we have another level of review by the headquarters staff, another group of scientists and engineers. Once they've agreed that it's an appropriate proposal, we then take it to the state and regional water boards. So yet another level of technical review. So we iterate with the state and regional water boards, sometimes a long time, sometimes not very long, until the point where they are satisfied that the science and the data are appropriate to grant an aquifer exemption. Once that happens, they write a letter to us that says, hey, we think this one's okay. It meets all the criteria in the law and the regulations to be an exempted aquifer. At that point, this kind of completes the state process in a lot of ways. We deliver a draft copy to the US EPA and go through a public comment period. So the public gets to take a look at it and also vet this proposal to see if in fact it meets all the criteria. So once that piece is over, there's a formal delivery to the United States Environmental Protection Agency. So understand that the only organization here that actually has the legal authority to exempt or not exempt an aquifer are these guys, the US EPA. So all we're doing here, the state process, is coming to a consensus between the various state agencies through a lot of technical review, through a lot of vetting, to take a proposal to the US EPA and say, we've looked at it hard and we think it meets all the criteria. But now the EPA has to look at it, and they too have to agree that it meets the criteria. So they make a decision, it's either approved or it's denied. And that's how the aquifer exemption process goes. So the point of all this is to make sure, one of our principal charters is to make sure that we're keeping this injected water away from the drinking water. So you can see the process is highly vetted. There's a lot of steps in here through a lot of technology, through a lot of people, through a lot of eyes, to get to the point where this decision says approved. We're certain that this thing is not going to be a threat to drinking water. So the proposals that are on the table today, there's a map showing where they're all at. So a lot of them here in the valley. Pat's got a bunch of them over here on the coast. Not really many elsewhere. There's one up here by Livermore. So between the inland and coastal districts is really the bulk of all these exemption proposals. In the valley, we have a situation where it's really kind of almost a binary system. On the east side of the valley, the water's so nearby, the oil is very, very fresh. It's drinking water. Whereas on the west side, it's much saltier. So our strategy and approach to how do we analyze these changes depending on not only the geology, but also the water chemistry. So just because you get an exempted aquifer, it doesn't actually mean you can do anything, right? It just means you have an exempted aquifer. There's more steps before you're allowed to inject. And one of the things, the next thing that we have to do, or we're going to do, is to take a look at all of the underground injection control projects. So I'm not quite sure how many there are, maybe 900 total, at least 600 here in the Inland District. And we need to go through one at a time and look at all the wells, look at the injection wells, look at all the neighboring wells, look at the geology, understand the potential for impacts. If there's issues, have those issues remediated. It's a large task. So we have teams of people, and I'll talk about how we kind of move our people around to do this. But part of this renewal plan is to help us have the tools to be able to accomplish this. It's a pretty big task. So we have new databases and new analytical technologies that we're going to be using. We have a detailed analysis of the injectors and the wells around it. And again, this is a process which involves not just us, but the water board in many cases, and even the public in some cases. So again, once you get an aquifer exempted, that just defines a container. Right? It says here's the geology, and here's this container. We believe this container is sound. And then we go through the UIC project approval, and we do all this analysis. You still don't get to inject yet. You still have to get a permit. And that permit can have all sorts of conditions on it, including monitoring and testing of the wells. There's a lot of testing that has to be done with injector wells to make sure that even though you're injecting down here, you don't have holes in the casing up here that have the potential to have an impact on the water. So it's actually not a simple process to get through all of this, but the end game remains that we have a high level of certainty that the things that we're permitting and approving meet all the specifications, all the regulations, and our charter to protect the waters of the United States. We're moving into some new, interesting, and exciting technologies, and Ernan over there is our expert in this. Do you have a mic? Okay, we'll talk about this later then. But we're starting to take a look more at traditionally we look at a well in isolation. So we're wanting to take a look at fields as systems. And to do that, you need an awful lot of data. So think about where we're trying to be today. So today, we're pretty much here on this chart, complexity versus business value. And we have a lot of paper that's reports of what happened. And we have a lot of paper. Where's Amanda? How much paper do we have, Amanda? We have a lot of paper. We have 100 years of data on paper. So what we do is we write it down on a piece of paper, we stick it in a drawer, and we can hopefully find it again. We're pretty good at finding it again. Not perfect, but we're pretty good. Analysis is the next phase, right? So how do we go to the next level saying, so what's the data mean? What are the trends analysis? Kind of a historical back view, looking at it, what happened, and maybe why. The next piece here is about monitoring, and the Aliso Canyon is a great example of this, although it's happening all over most of the oil fields. Today, real-time data coming in, streaming information from pressure sensors, from SCADA devices, gives us a real-time view, which we can now compare back to the analysis that we did of historical data. How is what's happening now compared to the historical trend analysis? Oops, I wasn't done yet. What we want to be able to get to is prediction. We like to be able to get out in front of the curve a little bit to say what might happen given the trend analysis that we see from this massive data. And the Holy Grail here is to get to not from a list of things that might happen, but a list of things that will likely happen. Aaron, you got your mic on? It's the red button on the bottom. Try it again. Try mine.
That's always easier. Hi. So, thank you, Bill. Hernan and Giano. Just want to talk a little bit about how we want to use predictive analytics. First, starting from like an industry point of view, I'm a production operations engineer. I worked with CRC and Oxy, and we really started looking at if you could predict when an electrical submersible pump fails, therefore you could predict the life of it, you could design it better, and you could ultimately save money on having to build new ones. So how do you do this problem? How do you fix this problem? So you look at all the variables that are coming in through your SCADA systems, supervisor control and data acquisition system. If suddenly your voltage is going up, if you're producing a lot of solids, maybe you have sanding, you have to change the type of stages. Regardless, it's a cycle in terms of one broken pump and another broken pump, there's something similar. You catch that for the third one, and before you know it, your lifespans increase. So now you're just applying this type of data analytics and being able to predict pump failure, which is good if you're doing base operations or base management. But what about injectors? If you're in a UIC project and suddenly your injectors are failing because you have subsidence in the diatomite formation and you can't reach bottom when you're cleaning out and abandoning a well, then that becomes a regulatory issue because per our regulations, we need to put cement at the bottom of a well. When you can't do that, you sidetrack the well, you abandon it, and suddenly you're paying for 2 wells instead of just 1. So for the predictive analytics model, we're really trying to find a way in terms of applying this technology that exists today so that instead of reacting to events like Aliso Canyon, to events like fracking's causing earthquakes in Oklahoma, to actually say this is going to happen because of X, Y, Z, and we've had so many events that we can model this, and we can get really good at it. And the big thing when you look at machine learning or all these other models that are really going to help you is where are you getting this information from? Nice thing about working for the Department of Conservation, you have the authority to request any and all information as long as it's tagged to some type of reg. So if we need it, we'll ask for it, and we get it. We just need people that know how to play with the data. So if you have some experience from a production, from a reservoir engineering, from a drilling point of view, from a geomechanics, it's here to be applied, and it's here to be available for everyone in the state. So that's why I think it's extremely exciting that you get to apply like this brand new technology that Silicon Valley is using to one of the world's oldest industries, which is oil and gas. So that's my spiel. Thank you.
Yeah, and Ronan, thanks, Ronan. So this is an example of some of the things that we're doing as part of the renewal plan and how we're upping our game and how we are planning to change the way we think, make decisions, and communicate. And this is one of the technologies that we're all very excited about because it is so powerful. And we're actually moving pretty aggressively forward on some plans to implement this division-wide. So why are you doing it? Well, you want to go from data to information to knowledge to wisdom. As Ernan was saying, once you get to wisdom, you learn a lot more about the system. If you're an operator, you're going to save money. If you're a regulator, you're going to be able to get in front of things before they happen. So it goes to a couple of things. So it's about predicting the future a little bit because it's all time lapse, and it's about cognitive computing, which is really about how your brain works. So there's a lot of changes going on at DOGGR. So we've got some new organizational models that we're using to meet some aggressive goals. So new management and new professionals. We're hiring new people at all levels. We're in an aggressive training program right now. We just finished this top core training, which was it was an association between University of Texas, Colorado School of Mines, there were two others that were in top core. And now we're getting another piece here, which is the PEDX modules, and we're licensing this from the University of Texas, custom made here for California, and so that'll be coming online here very quickly. We'll own that and have it for use for everybody. New technology, I talked about that. We're rejigging how we run the districts in order to balance the loads better. New ways of working together, some of the tools we're using. And better ways of working with the stakeholders, which are broad. So they include you in the room, it includes operators, it includes the NGOs, it includes the legislature, it includes the public, it includes the environment, it includes everything. We have a large distribution of shareholders, stakeholders. But kind of at a high level, one of the things that we're trying to do is move from a role which you've had traditionally, which is this reactive and punitive. Right? The phone rings, you know what, DOGGR, we spilled some oil. It's all over the street, and so we'll go clean it up and come in and talk to us about it. Well, you know, it was bad enough. Well, we're gonna levy a fine against you, and so that's the traffic cop, you know, stopping you for speeding and writing you a ticket. So contrast that with this guy. Do people know who this guy is? So you ever seen the videos of the dancing cops in New York City at the intersections, right? So his job, as opposed to sitting there behind a billboard with a radar gun playing gotcha, is to make sure nothing bad happens, right? He's out in the middle of it. He's directing traffic. So you go there, you go there. My job is to make sure that nothing bad happens. That's his job. So moving from reactive and punitive to predictive and preventative is certainly a goal of the division in our regulatory capacity. Really trying to recognize and intervene in impacts and practices. It's much better to have oil not spilled, to have people not get hurt, than to levy fines against operators for spilling oil and hurting people. So that's really the premise behind this strategy. In modernizing your data management, so we're very good librarians, right? So as I said, we've got 100 years. We've been writing stuff down on pieces of paper and putting it in drawers. So there's a picture of a library. I don't know if you recognize that picture or not. There's Bill Murray in the background. But we're moving to a digital world, and we have a bunch of new databases coming online. We have a bunch of new strategies coming online. We're looking at data lakes and data in the cloud and computing in the cloud, so that we're moving into a digital enterprise. And this movement into the digital enterprise requires a lot of things to happen. It's not just buying a bunch of computers and disks and cables, right? It has to do with people. It has to do with people that know how to do these things. Renan talked about skill sets in analytics. Well, to move from a world of filing pieces of paper, finding them again, to filing digits, finding it again in a logical manner is a different skill set. And so we're anxious to be populating our organization with those kinds of skill sets so we can move aggressively into the digital enterprise. The new database we're bringing in is going to be online pretty soon, not in full force for probably the better part of a year. But it is a database. It's the RBDMS from the Groundwater Protection Council, and it's a risk-based data management system. So this is an example from, I think this is Utah. In any case, there's a base copy. There's 23 states that have this already. We are customizing it for California because it needed to be. Other states are now starting to look at what we have done and are doing through this customization program. Texas was out here just last week, as a matter of fact, taking a look at what we're doing to say, gee, California, you guys are actually really way out ahead of the curve now. we'd like to understand what it is you're doing with this. This is more of a transactional database, however, so it's going to manage all the permitting applications and those sorts of things, production reports. There's a lot of things that we still want to do in terms of simulation models, earth models, analytics that will not fit into this. So we have some other data strategies around that, which we're working with the CIO in Sacramento to implement. And then new technology. So, at this point in time, I need a better crystal ball, right? So I can only see as far as I can see. So what are we going to do to get that? So a bunch of new things coming in that we're going to be implementing. So earth and reservoir modeling, frac analysis, 3D visualization, stream 2 modeling, and a couple of sensing technologies. We're looking at LiDAR on drones, and we're looking at INSAR from satellites. So trying to really get an integrated data set on how do we view the world. So it's just darn hard to see very far below my feet, right? So how do we get better information to what's going on? So some of these, especially these remote sensing technologies, coupled with the rest of these subsurface technologies in a predictive analytics framework, we hope is going to give us better insights into how the subsurface is working through these remote sensing types of technologies and databases. We have a lot of research projects going on actively right now. So this one is actually just starting up. It's an Earth Observatory with Lawrence Livermore National Labs. Gas storage, we have an active research project with them, again, based off the Aliso Canyon situation. Induced seismicity, which I already talked about, is a hot topic. Lawrence Berkeley is working on that one. We're working with Lawrence Livermore Labs on hydraulic fracturing, geomechanics, a very exciting study. They're taking some of their software from the dark side of the lab, which is all about hydrogen bombs and things, into the bright side of the lab so that we can use the algorithms and the computing and the supercomputing systems in order to model things like hydraulic fracturing and fluid flow through fractured media. Subsurface and surface integration, we have a really exciting project going on now with a graduate student at Stanford. It's about reservoir systems, it's about risk analysis, and multivariate statistics, and then Ernan already talked about predictive analytics, which is becoming a big part of our portfolio. Legislation that we're working on, so Island Orphan Wells was passed, gas storage regs are just coming in, so regs around all these things, including gas storage steam operations, surface expressions, underground injection controls, and facilities are all on the books coming forward. So I talked about water before, and one of the things that we also think about is what do you do with the water, right? And especially in a drought world, and there's this new law, which is called SGMA, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, says that if you can take a gallon of water out of the ground, you got to put a gallon back, right? You got to figure out where it's going to come from. So this is a great example here at Coelho. I'm sure many of you have seen this in the newspapers. There's been a lot of talk about Coelho. But there's 29 million gallons of water coming out of the Kern River operation into the Coelho Water District every day. This has been going on for decades. So the questions about this, so you can take produced water, you can discharge it, as it's called in the water world, but you got to make sure that it's not compromising the crops, the people, and the rest of these things. So there's a lot of analysis that goes into this. And the Coelho was challenged with coming up with independent analysis. They'd always been monitoring this, always been measuring it. So they got some independent analysis, and they continue to do this, and these are some of the results they came up with. So the level of acetone is 280 times below the MCL for safe drinking water. The hydrocarbons are 750 times below drinking water standards. When they looked at the crops, they found that the crops irrigated with the Coelho water had roughly the same composition as crops irrigated with other waters. In fact, I read one study where the other crops that were not irrigated with Coelho water actually had higher concentrations of these chemicals than the Coelho water crops did. And there's other fields that also provide water agricultural districts. So I know a lot of the water districts and the farmers are looking at produced water as a very important resource, especially from the east side of the valley where the water quality is actually very, very high, as a way to either meet their SGMA goals or to have sufficient water to manage their agricultural needs. So that's DOGGR. So kind of in summary, what do we do and where? So oil and gas delivers quite a lot of value, as I think we all know. What do? We're the regulators, so we're the cops, and we regulate all the activity associated with drilling, producing, and abandoning the wells. Our role is to enforce laws and regulations with the goal optimizing the value of the resource while ensuring maximum protection of safety, health, life, and the environment. And all of our offices are growing pretty fast. So here in Bakersfield, when I came here about 16 months ago, we had about 60-something people, and now we're a little over 80. So we're continuing to add some positions that we can talk about.